Hello, my name is Jalin Ashute. I'm the Chief Technology Officer with the DHI. I'm here today to talk to you about the demonstration and simulation environment. So, to start with, just a very quick one, assuming that you've already heard about DHI's general purpose, talking specifically about the demonstration simulation environment, or the DSE for short. We have three basic forms of activity that kind of feed from the DHI's main innovation model. The first is in the bottom side, the kind of service side. We craft scenarios through co-design with users and with clinicians and other practitioners, and these often have a person-centered data sharing component to them, and we create a kind of digital person, if you like, replete with the full kind of data set we'd expect that person to have, and we use that to support the technical component, which is simulation. So we kind of simulate that data, and we use it to test how systems integrate and evolve a kind of trust architecture that puts that person at the center of a consent-based data sharing ecosystem. The last component is the commercial component, and that is where we continuously engage with industry, continuously engage and analyze the market, and look at new and emerging business and service models, and in some cases generate new service models. And we roadmap, we understand how the market is changing, and we help organizations understand almost like a kind of five-step process of change, so we can enact some small changes now without prejudicing about our ability to change as the market shifts later. So we combine those three elements to create demonstrations that we give in this environment, and through that help the market, help commissioners, help policymakers, help health and care professionals move forward, understanding the art of the possible. So some of the principles we work to are under the kind of banner of Care 4.0, and we'll talk about that just for a little bit now. So the first thing is the trends are shifting in policy. Anyone working in health and care will know that we're moving from the left-hand side to the right, from doctors, medical, health centre, hospital kind of orientation, now towards a long-term support person living life, a kind of more holistic kind of approach. The main reason we've created a set of principles around Care 4.0 is because most of the technology investment is still fundamentally on the left-hand side of this, and we're looking to see if we can stimulate more on the right-hand side. We're doing this because it's obviously part of the policy driver, but because it also makes better use of the underlying capabilities of digital. So to illustrate that, just to look very quickly at what makes up a health outcome. For anyone not from a public health background, this is a model based on something called the social determinants of health, which basically says that your health outcomes are a composite of your clinical care, your individual behavior, your physical environment, and your social and economic environment. And the key thing here is that that the clinical care component that usually gets most of the investment is only 20% of the overall outcome. Now, what we've done is over the course of the last few years of co-design and industry engagement, we've been mapping personal data items. We've got about 225 in a kind of a list that we've just been curating as we go. So not systematic, but just to have an idea of what we're dealing with, and we categorize that against the social determinants of health. So as you would probably expect, the volume of personal data items, which might be your GPS location, your address, your blood pressure readings, your medications, your job history, the volume of these data items, types of data items, broadly corresponds to the value around your well-being. and the other new category there is general, and that pertains to things like address, which are common and can't easily be categorized against any one of these components. Why I've done this is to show that clinical care component is in terms of the personal data items of significance, is even smaller, and it's just to drive home the idea that if we're trying to deliver on what digital is meant to deliver on, which from a DHI point of view, we say that is prevention and personalization. For both of these things to work, we need to understand context. We need to understand the person's lived context, and so to do that, looking just at the blue segment is a mistake. We need the rest of the story to really personalize services for an individual and get ahead of the curve and deliver preventative services. Never before have we been as able to collect that data and collect that data in an automated way. The fourth industrial revolution, building on the previous industrial revolutions, using cyber physical systems and the Internet of Things and new forms of networking, effectively can allow us to connect everything to the internet, including some very passive and ambient data collecting methods, everything from your home temperature to energy consumption to retail habits. We are starting to move into a world where we can collect that kind of data at scale. The issue for us being that most of the capabilities that allow us to do this are organization-centric, largely for commercial profit, and or in some cases for government surveillance, and there is a very low trust in our ability to ambiently monitor. So we have a trust gap there. So Care 4.0 is proposing how we deal with that trust deficit and try and help the market function better. And that's in trying to reframe how we might see the person as a part of the architecture, if you like. In the top left, we see Industry 4.0 very much thinking of the person as a consumer, focused on manufacturing, on retail, on consumerism, using new 4.0 capabilities for competitive advantage and agility in the marketplace. Health is starting to get in on this from a clinical care point of view, being a person as a patient, to optimize clinical care, to target it more effectively, genomics and this sort of thing. And by and large, as most things in the health sector at the moment, that's largely in response to pressure and trying to find some stability and get better throughput from our clinical care services. So what we're trying to say is, how would we think about this if we were following policy, wanting the person, a government policy, wanting the person to be at the center of this, the point of integration in the community, to allow them to co-manage their own care, to be empowered, and so we want to use the 4.0 toolset to help manage the complexity and offer personalization by using the inherent flexibility of this kind of data-driven approach. So to illustrate that, just quickly kind of whisk you through the kind of mindset as to what we mean via person versus organization-centric kind of models of thinking. If I build up the kind of 4.0 tool set for you, we've got the cyber physical system, which is the sensor that can affect the real world. So not just a temperature sensor, but a temperature sensor that can change the smart thermostat on your radiator to turn off the heating when you get to a certain temperature, for example. Internet of Things is simply the network of those sensors that are able to act semi-autonomously. So it might be that the GPS on your phone interacts with the smart thermostat, meaning that if you're 200 yards away from your home, your radiators turn off. Internet services is the idea that we can deploy a set of services on top of the Internet of Things, which may or may not be delivered by the people providing the sensor hardware. So just like I just described, in that instance, it's a smartphone manufacturer providing GPS, an energy company or a smart IoT company providing the smart thermostat, and it need not be the same companies providing that kind of intelligence and automation on top of it. And then we've got finally a smart factory or virtual agent sort of capability. So smart factories, the industry 4.0 parlance, I describe it as a virtual agent, which is effectively the kind of enterprise-wide machine learning kind of assisted kind of navigator decision-making support. So how can you make the best use of the data to help people interact with the service or help the service optimize its resource use? So that's the 4.0 tool set, that's pure. What we then do is apply some organizational thinking. We say, here's a cloud infrastructure, here's a user interface, we'll put a nurse in front of that, and that's how we'll collect blood pressure and weight and other things, and people will use our technologies and we will monitor them. And then we'll integrate it with our own systems, and then we'll lock it down. And this is now the only way that you're allowed to collect blood pressure. Okay, and that's the typical way we think from an organization-centered point of view. And equivalently in consumer systems, as a similar thought process, which tries to lock people in to an extent. So that green box could very well be Apple, for example, that has Apple Watch and Tado and smart scales, smart scales, for example, and then an app store is the marketplace, iCloud and HealthKit, the cloud kind of services, and Siri being the kind of AI assistant. So you'll see that kind of pattern emerging over and over again. And the problem with this model is that it doesn't really scale well from a user's point of view, because you as a user then have many logins, many different organizations, and we have to use the technology in each of those organizations' terms, which means duplication, it means effort, and it means friction. And for most people, they get to around about 7 to 10 apps on their phone before they start phasing out and ignoring everything thereafter. And so we see poor retention for getting people to actually engage with digital channels past a certain point of saturation because of this issue. So this is the thing that's going to stop the spread and scale of digital in the way that everyone envisages it happening. So what we're proposing instead is saying, right, well, our person-centered approach to this, and this is derived from our co-design work, would be to say, how can people tell their story once? That's an absolutely fundamental thing. Not filling in 14 different versions of the same form, not talking to many different professionals, having to start from the beginning every time, not having to repeat data entry, not having to use technologies we don't want or want to use over and over again. And so what we're saying instead is, can we give the person the ability to curate their story and hold it themselves once? And can that person then offer that story on a consented basis to many different organizations so they can all feed off that one story? So the idea and the kind of phrase that was kind of coined, I guess, by one of our co-design participants was, why do I have to log in with all these people? I am the only consistent factor in this. Why can't all these organizations log into me? And so that's effectively what we see as ultimately the fastest route to an integrated, empowering GDPR compliant marketplace where where we see the digital marketplace move forward at a pace. The benefit of this from at a kind of innovation level is, as people are able to use their data to activate services, groups of people can group their data and offer that grouped data to third parties to offer them new services that we can't conceive of today. And I don't know what those services might look like, but the example I often give is, imagine a group of 40 diabetics in Wick who have organized a walking group, and they go for a walk 2 or 3 times a week. Most of them are wearing wearables of one form or another, and imagine a world in which they could pool their data and prove that their walking group achieves better diabetes control than NHS weight loss classes, for example. Could they use that data to prove that to the NHS and then have their model subsidized instead of being offered the NHS service? So that's the kind of community empowerment angle. So just to quickly then relate that into some practical actions. So DHI is taking some of those principles forward in a kind of active, integrated technology kind of ecosystem approach to help people kind of move forward with this. And so, if people haven't yet seen it, you can look on our website for our lessons learned over the last 2 years of simulation from our phase 1B work. Effectively, what we've done is worked with a range of businesses and public sector organisations and charities. We've created a open person-centered data exchange. That's the thing in the middle there. The only way of sharing data through that exchange is through the user's active consent. So this is the thing that allows them to trust in the system, because they have full control over who can see what, who can use what, and how, when, and where. It's connected to a personal data store on the right-hand side, which is provided by a community interest company that's not for profit, in the commercial sense of the word, that is asset locked and works on a zero knowledge basis. And so it's the kind of whitest of white places that we could think of to store the actual data in this model. And again, that's an imperative for data portability and for data trust. And then we connected in the bottom left-hand corner to NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde's clinical record systems to show that we can extract and submit data, so taking out medication data, taking out appointment data, pushing in blood pressure data from tools on the bottom right. Connecting to Apple Health Kit, because the principle is to go where the energy is, go where people actually want to use technology. Connected into Armed, which is a kind of falls prevention and well-being tool run by CM. And connected into third-party interfaces and care coordination tools and WhatsApp style kind of social messaging tools to show how this data can be manifested in different forms, that you don't have to use any of the interfaces provided by any of the organizations in this model. So if you want to curate your story once, you can do that separately from any given source of data. And so that's a kind of slightly more functional look at what you're looking at there. A statutory integration layer, the trust infrastructure is the health exchange and the personal data store in the grey box. We've got the PHR, which is that kind of care coordination, kind of data aggregation kind of tool, and some microservices for frailty and blood pressure, and then using some open market capabilities, some friendly and ubiquitous consumer technologies. And moving into this next phase and just giving you something to sort of start to work with in the future. We'll be integrating that with some of the government's open EHR clinical data repository work to see if we can get to national scale. We'll be putting in place more functionality around home Internet of Things exchanges, so not moving beyond health data now, as we described, and going into environmental and behavioural kind of data sets. Be engaging more of the PHR, the kind of personal health record style companies, to give us more flexibility in how that works. We're looking at a broader array of digital capabilities in the market, and we've been commissioned by government to deliver on a number of simulations to show the art of the possible using this architecture, and we'll publish more on that soon. So key dates you should be looking at are and this is provisional at the moment, so there might be a little bit of slippage, but broadly speaking, February 2020 we'll have completed re-procurement of some of the trust infrastructure, so that's the grey box, and then we'll be able to shortly thereafter make the APIs and developer instructions available on request to play with that infrastructure. And the idea is people on a simulated basis, no live data, will be able to play with that infrastructure to kind of test out new service models, and that in between the kind of February and December 2020 kind of mark, we'll be engaging the market to provide some of those individual microservices on top of that architecture. So if you're interested in any more, you can go Care 4.0 and we can scan this QR code, and you can find more online. But otherwise, watch this space until February. Thank you very much.